Stormwalker's Grit, a memoir of struggle and strength, written and narrated by Steve Urban, 2025. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced in any form without prior written consent from the publisher, except for brief quotations in reviews or analysis. Dedication. For Kim. You didn't just survive the storms with me, you braved them, you steadied the ship. You saw the real me, the broken and guarded parts, and loved me anyway. This life, this book, and our family exist because of your strength. For Nick, Spencer, Felicia, and Kyle. I know I was tough and pushed hard. I demanded a lot, maybe too much sometimes. But I hope you always knew it came from love. I wasn't perfect, but my intentions were always pure. Everything I did was to protect, prepare, and give you a better life than I had. Even when I was quiet or distant, I was thinking about you every single day. This book is for all of you, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. A story of mistakes, redemption, grit, and grace. Someday, when your kids or grandkids ask who we were, I hope you hand them this book and say, this is our legacy. This is where we come from. This is how we loved, even when we didn't always say it right. Because you don't come from nothing. You come from people who never stopped fighting for you. You come from heart. And you are always the reason I kept going. Note to the reader. This story doesn't unfold in a straight line because life rarely does. You'll notice the chapters jump around in time. That's intentional. This book isn't built like a timeline. It's built like memory, raw, messy, and honest. We remember moments that matter, not in order, but in emotion. If you want clean chronology, flip to the back for a simple timeline map. Otherwise, let the story lead. Let the heartbreaks, gut punches, and comebacks guide you. What matters most isn't when something happens, it's why it changed me and how it might change you. Prologue, rock bottoms and right turns. My story didn't begin with privilege. It started on the poor side of Chickasha, Oklahoma, in a rundown apartment where the heat didn't always work and the neighbors yelled through thin walls. After my parents divorced, it was just me and Mom. She worked long hours as a bank teller and came home exhausted, yet she made hamburger helper stretch for 2 nights and always found a way to keep the lights on. Dad was out in the oil fields, drifting in and out. Neither of my parents went to college. We had bare cupboards and hand-me-down coats, but we had grit. That grit, our invisible armor, carried me through 1,000 storms. This isn't a business memoir. It's for anyone who's ever felt behind, broken, or beaten down. It's about getting knocked on your ass and standing back up when no one's clapping. It's about figuring out who you are not when the lights are on, but when you're alone and scared with only the voice whispering, don't quit. Chapter 1, Mattress on the Floor, Texas, mid-1990s. Before the storm, there were whispers, the kind you pretend not to hear, fights that started and never ended, smiles that stopped reaching the eyes, silence that moved in and refused to leave. I didn't see it coming. I kissed my wife on the cheek and wrestled our 2 boys before leaving on a work trip. Nick was 4. Spencer was still in diapers. I told them I'd be back in 3 days. I left thinking I had a flawed but stable life. When I came back, the lights were off, the driveway was empty, and the front door hung open like life had kicked it in. Inside, nothing. No photos, no clothes, no kids, no dog, not even the forks. A spilled cup of milk was curdling on the kitchen floor. Closet hangers swayed like ghosts. There was no note, no goodbye, just absence, and it screamed. I stood there until the cold sank into my bones. I unraveled. I walked through the house like a man looking for shadows. Then I remembered the old mattress we'd thrown behind the shed. The new one was gone. The old one was left behind, like me. I dragged it through the mud and rain. It was heavier than I remembered, covered in leaves and dirt, sagging like I did. I laid it in the living room, collapsed onto it in wet jeans, and stared at the ceiling as if it might give me a reason to keep breathing. It didn't. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't pray. I existed. Nothing changed the next morning, but I was still breathing. I called my father, not knowing what I hoped to hear. Maybe comfort, maybe understanding. When I choked out what happened, he said flatly, "Don't mess that job up." That was it? No. Are you okay? No, I'm sorry. That told me everything I needed to know about the support I would or wouldn't get. A few weeks later, my boss Dave found out I was struggling. He didn't ask questions or make a speech. We were closing a store and he saw a few break room items being trashed, a scratched microwave, a dented mini fridge, a wobbly table, some plastic chairs. On his own dime, he rented a U-Haul, drove it to my trailer, and helped me unload it. No pep talk, no pity, presence. Those items became my kitchen. That became my dignity. That era was brutal. I was broke, hollow, and ashamed. I couldn't bring myself to go home after work. I stacked back-to-back store visits across Texas. I lived off the company credit card, stayed in cheap motels, ate on the per diem, and slept with one eye open. I told myself it was strategy, but the truth was, it was hiding. I kept moving, walked into stores with a smile, shook hands like everything was fine, then closed the car door and let the weight crush me. Eventually, I found another place, found Kim, started building again. But I never forgot those weeks. I never forgot what it felt like to swipe that card with a prayer. I never looked down on anyone scraping by. I've been there. I've lived out of suitcases, lied through my teeth, and hid my desperation behind a clipboard and a pressed shirt. As I dragged that mattress through the mud, a phrase took root: 0 to something. I didn't know what it meant yet. I only knew I wasn't staying at 0. That chapter taught me that dignity matters more than dollars. Sometimes showing up when everything in you is breaking is the win. Chapter 2, The Truth and the Truck. Oklahoma, early 1990s. Some truths hit like a truck. Others whisper and detonate everything inside you. One afternoon in Tulsa, I sat in my apartment, wallpaper peeling at the corners, a pot of burned Folgers on the counter. Mom had come up from Chickasha. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't pacing. She just said it flat and cold, like reading a recipe. "Steve, Keith isn't your biological father." I blinked. "What?" She repeated it slower. "There was a man back in Fort Worth. I got pregnant before I came back here. Keith isn't your real dad." The floor dropped out. My breath caught. My stomach turned inside out. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and went to my truck. I sat there, hands frozen on the wheel, staring through the windshield like the sky might offer an answer. Then I did what any heart-punched son might do. I called Keith, already crying before he picked up. "You're not my dad," I shouted. Did you know?" He was quiet. Then he said, "That was your mother's responsibility. We agreed she'd tell you one day. That was it. No emotion, no apology, no explanation." Days later, I learned the worst part everyone else knew. My half-brother, cousins, aunts, uncles, people who shared meals and said they loved me, they knew, and I didn't. It wasn't the lie that broke me. It was the silence. The fact that I'd been living someone else's truth and nobody told me. Life moved on, kids, jobs, bills, but the question lingered. Who was he? Eventually, I spat into a tube and sent it to Ancestry. Weeks later, I got a name, a face, a digital breadcrumb trail. The gut punch: he'd died a year before I found him. Too late. Before that revelation, there was the red house. From grades 4 through 7, we lived in a little red house in the country. It was the first time I remember feeling free. We had space. We had a yard big enough to ride a rusty three-wheeler for hours. We spent evenings chasing rabbits, shooting BB guns at cans, and racing down dirt roads on a battered ATV. It was chaos, but it was ours. When I close my eyes now and breathe in the Wyoming and Colorado mountains, I still feel that stretch of open sky. It's why I crave space now, why I take long drives, why I feel claustrophobic in cities. That little red house planted that longing in me. Then came the fall. We lost the house. Mom and I moved into a cramped apartment in Chickasha, walls thin enough to hear arguments through. My brother went to live with Dad. I stayed with Mom. Money got tight. I started working at KFC at age 15 so I could have my own money. In high school, I bagged groceries and mopped floors at the neighborhood convenience store. I scraped by because I had to. I started college at USAO on academic probation. I worked night shifts at the store, lived on college loans that took me 10 years to pay off, and held down a resident assistant job in the college dorms. Those early jobs weren't glamorous, but they taught me grit. They set the stage for everything that followed. I wasn't gifted a career. I clawed my way into one. Chapter 3. The John Wayne Talk. After the divorce, after the mattress, after the silence and rain, I was still standing. Barely. I called my dad, Keith, late one night. He wasn't the emotional type. He was John Wayne in a ball cap. Stoic, practical, not one for hugs or "I love you." He did hard work and hard lessons. I told him what had happened, my voice cracking. I wanted comfort, to hear he was proud or that it would be okay. Instead, he said, "Well, you better not mess that job up." That was it. No warmth, no pause, no check-in. At first, I was angry. Then I understood. That was his way. Blunt, brutal, but real. He was saying, don't let this beat you. Do the one thing still in your control. Show up and don't screw it up. And that's what I did. I poured everything into my job. I worked overtime, led store teams, drove across Texas like my life depended on it, because it did. That job fed my kids, gave me a reason to keep going, and reminded me I could still be something even when I felt like nothing. Later, I understood something about Keith. He wasn't wired to express love, but he lived it. He stayed, he worked, he didn't run. And maybe that's what I needed most. I choose to share this moment once, here, because its weight carried through my life. Whenever I got knocked down, those words echoed, "Don't mess it up." They cut, but they also kept me moving. Chapter 4, Kim, the Stormwalker. I didn't meet Kim in a romantic comedy. I met her in a honky-tonk outside Austin, neon lights buzzing, sawdust on the floor, George Strait on the speakers. I was wrecked. She was guarded. We were both survivors. I wore a cowboy hat. She had blonde hair, blue eyes, and a confidence that needed no words. We danced, we twirled, we laughed. It felt like a movie, but we were anything but picture perfect. I asked her questions, rapid fire, like I was interviewing her. What do you do? Do you have kids? What's your story? She didn't check a single box on my imaginary list. She was a CNA. She hadn't finished high school. She had 2 kids. She was scraping by, and her live-in boyfriend was moving out. On paper, she was chaos. But there was something steady and fierce about her. She was real. I didn't call her right away. She called me. I'm glad she did. We started dating. I tried to run, told her I wasn't ready. She didn't chase me. She kept showing up. She had grit. I walked away from her 4 times in those early months. Each time she let me go, then quietly showed up anyway. She'd make dinner for my boys without saying a word and meet me at the dance hall the next Friday. She never begged. She never bargained. She believed I'd find my way back. I did. One night I got sick, appendix trouble. She took care of me like we'd been married for a decade, cooked, cleaned, held it together. That's when I knew she wouldn't just love me, she'd fight for me. She followed me to Connecticut when I got promoted, but because we weren't married, she had no legal standing when her ex filed for custody. She lost her kids. She cried quietly for months, but never turned that pain on my boys. She followed me across the country, and it cost her everything. We moved into a tiny duplex, 800 square feet. When we left Texas for Connecticut, we weren't just changing states. We were running from ghosts, failed marriages, small town judgments, who we used to be. The East Coast gave us anonymity and a fresh start. When the kids visited, we had all four of them, Nick, Spencer, Felicia, and Kyle, stacked in one room. It was messy, but it was family. And Kim never stopped mothering. She folded laundry, packed lunches, showed up for my boys like they were her own, even while grieving the loss of hers. She never blamed me. She kept loving. That's Kim. She doesn't lead with words. She leads with action. She won't say, I love you first, but she'll remember your favorite shirt and buy it 3 days later, leaving it on your bed. She's a giver, a rock, a stormwalker. I would have fallen apart without her. Chapter 5, Faith in the Fog. There's a moment in every man's life when the noise dies down and you're left alone with nothing but your thoughts and God. Mine came in the front seat of my car in a random parking lot in the middle of nowhere. It was late. I'd finished another long day of pretending everything was fine, but it wasn't. My career had stalled. Bills were piling up. I was trying to hold it together for Kim, for the kids, for the version of myself I hoped might show up again. Deep down, I felt lost, unanchored, like the wheel had come off and no one was coming. I gripped the steering wheel and whispered a prayer, unpolished and unrehearsed. God, if you're real, now would be a good time. No lightning bolt, no sudden answer, stillness, but something shifted. It wasn't a miracle. It was a moment where I chose to believe that maybe I wasn't done yet. That night, I didn't find God in a church pew. I found him in the fog of uncertainty, in the silence, in desperation. I found him when I was too tired to fake it and too broke to pretend. From that point on, I started to live differently. I didn't need a preacher or pulpit. I needed a reason to keep going. I found it slowly in the eyes of my boys, in Kim's belief, in whispered moments where I could finally stop performing. My faith isn't clean. It's not pretty. I don't follow every rule, but I pray, I believe, and I don't walk alone anymore. Chapter 6, Losing Her Twice. I saw it coming before anyone else did, not because I was dramatic or paranoid, but because I was there. I lived with the swings, the shutdowns, the stories that didn't add up. One day she was warm and doting, making pancakes and laughing with the boys. The next she was gone for days, unreachable, only to reappear like nothing had happened. I told people, her parents, my parents, friends, I said, shh, something's wrong. She's not okay. This isn't a rough patch. This is something deeper. They nodded, smiled, changed the subject, or worse, they looked at me like I was exaggerating, like I was unstable, like I was trying to slander the mother of my children because I couldn't handle my marriage falling apart. When she finally disappeared and left me standing in an empty house with 2 missing sons, I wasn't heartbroken. I was enraged because I had warned them. I had begged someone to take it seriously. And no one did. She was wild, unstable, and unpredictable. At the time, it felt like trying to build a life in a tornado. One moment calm, the next raging over something that didn't happen. I was constantly bracing for which version of her would walk through the door. Then she didn't walk through the door at all. She took the boys and disappeared. That was the mattress night, the curdled milk, the unraveling. Getting my kids back didn't happen overnight. Nick came first. We were living in Chickasha by then. He was about 12 and said he wanted to stay with us. I called my ex, and to my surprise, she agreed. Spencer came next. He visited for the summer and didn't want to go back. I called her again. I'm not sending them back. I'm not asking for child support. Sign over custody and let me raise them. She agreed. No fight, no emotion. She mailed back the signed papers. We met in a grocery store parking lot. She handed them over like they were bags of groceries. No hug, no goodbye. A car seat handoff and a nod. Nick rode shotgun. Spencer climbed into the back seat, looked at me, and asked, "Are we staying with you forever?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, buddy, forever." I rarely talk about what it took to get to that parking lot. Before I got them back for good, there were many nights I handed my boys over at a payphone outside a gas station. I'd be crying, and they'd be shaking. My ex-wife would drive up late, headlights off, eyes flat. The boys climbed into her car. I stood there, receiver dangling, watching taillights disappear, feeling like my insides had been ripped out. I walked back to my truck, slid down to the pavement, and sobbed. That phone booth was where I realized nobody was coming to save us. If I wanted my sons back, I had to be willing to lose them first. I paid a price. Spencer lost health coverage while he was with her. I covered doctor visits out of pocket and the cost of her wrecking 2 cars. I cleaned up the mess, paid deductibles, bought replacements. When I told her she'd never owe me a dime if she signed over custody, I meant it. I gave up the right to child support so my boys could have stability. I paid lawyers, paperwork, court fees. I lost sleep, years, thousands of dollars. But I would have emptied my bank account and worked nights at KFC again if that's what it took. Because the only thing worse than fighting for your kids is not fighting at all. That night, Spencer fell asleep with his arms wrapped around my hoodie. Nick curled up as if guarding his brother. Kim was already unpacking their bags, folding their clothes, making space not just in our home, but in her heart. She'd lost her own kids, yet she loved mine like they were hers. That was the night we became a family. Not in a courtroom, in a parking lot, in a promise. Chapter 7, Kim, the heartbeat behind the hustle. There's a saying, behind every strong man is a stronger woman. In my case, her name is Kim. After my first wife left and I moved into that oil field trailer outside Austin, I spent 8 months completely alone. No dates, intimacy, or noise. A man, a mattress, and a company car. I'd go to work, come home, eat something cheap, and crawl into bed. Every night I whispered to God, please don't let me be alone forever. Please send someone real. I didn't know if he was listening. I kept praying anyway. One day I signed up for dance lessons. I don't even know why. I needed to move, to feel human. Something shifted. I stood straighter. I smiled more. Then came the women, lots of them. I was making up for lost time or hiding from the pain. None of them stuck. Until one night at a honky-tonk outside Austin, I met Kim. 2 people bruised by life carrying invisible baggage. I was broke, recently divorced, trying to hold it together. She was raising 2 kids with no child support, working long hours. We had nothing, but we saw something in each other. When I say I had nothing, I mean it. I was living in a $200 oil rig trailer so small it couldn't fit a regular mattress. I'd been wiped out emotionally, financially, spiritually. Kim walked into that turbulence with grace. She didn't flinch or judge. She believed. Kim didn't grow up with rough edges. She was made of them. One early memory? Her mom pulling into the back lot of a grocery store in Ardmore, Oklahoma. They were living in a shelter. No money, no food, no real plan. Her mom popped the trunk, grabbed a box, and said, let's see what they threw out today. Kim was a kid but understood the drill. Help find bread that wasn't too moldy, check for cans not dented, look for anything not torn, no crying, no questions, survival. That moment never left her. Years later, I'd open our pantry and find enough food to survive a long winter. Freezers full, drawers of snacks, cookies we didn't even eat. It wasn't wasteful. It was memory. Every chapter of my life worth remembering has her name somewhere in the margin. Chapter 8, Fireproofed by Failure. Colorado, 2008. They called it a promotion. Congratulations, Steve. You're the new chief operating officer. It should have felt like winning the lottery. Instead, a knot formed in my stomach. The company wasn't stable. The economy was collapsing. The year was one of a global financial crisis, and I was handed the wheel of a leaking ship. I walked into my office, shut the door, and stared at a stack of reports. Sales were tanking. Morale was shot. I didn't know what I was doing. There was no manual. I made my own. I walked every inch of that operation. I listened to the lowest paid employees and the highest paid executives. I read reports like my life depended on it, because it did. Then I started cutting. Not people at first. Waste, inefficiencies, ego-driven projects, vanity metrics, but the numbers kept bleeding. Eventually, I had to let people go. That tore me up. I knew their names, their families, the look in their eyes when they realized a paycheck was disappearing. I signed termination letters with shaking hands. I delivered news that gutted me. Laying off good people so the company could survive was the hardest thing I'd ever done in a suit. It kept me up at night. It made me question the point of saving a ship if you had to throw passengers overboard. I didn't sleep. I didn't fake it. I worked. We got traction. By year's end, profitability jumped 35%. There was no celebration. There was a long exhale. Sometimes leadership feels less like triumph and more like survival, proving to yourself that you can stand in the fire and not burn. Before that promotion, failure saved me. I'd moved from stock boy to district manager at Bath and Body Works. Sales were strong. My team liked me. One day, the district manager walked in with human resources and slid a paper across my desk. Terminated. I had given a promotional basket of products to a charity without asking for permission. It was against policy. No warning, no second chance. I walked out carrying a box of soap and shame. I drove home, sat on the edge of the bed, and told Kim. She didn't flinch. She said, "Okay, what's next?" I called everyone I knew. Eventually, I landed a job at Dollar General and then transitioned to a few other roles before securing a position at Color Star Growers. We moved to Colorado because of that job. It gave us steady income and a fresh start. It was our lifeline. Getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to move. It set me up for the leadership role that sharpened me. Sometimes the shove you hate is the one you need. Chapter 9. Built from scratch. Colorado, 2013. By 2013, I had the title, salary, and respect, but not peace. I'd spent decades building things for others, growing their companies, brands, and bottom lines. I wanted to build something for us, something that reflected our values, not just our skills. Starting Riderflex was another zero to something moment. I bet on myself with grit and Kim's belief. No outside funding, no fancy office, an old laptop, a secondhand phone, and Kim saying, "I believe in you." We were broke. Again. I didn't pay myself for months. Kim worked extra shifts to keep us afloat. I handled sales, recruiting, interviews, billing, everything. I pitched clients on heart and hustle, on the belief that who you are matters more than what's on your resume. Slowly it worked. We placed our first candidates. Clients returned, then came referrals. What we were doing wasn't just business. It was belief building, helping people laid off, beat down, ignored, or overlooked find their footing. Riderflex became proof that you can start from nothing and build something meaningful. You don't need money to build impact. You need guts, vision, and someone like Kim in your corner when the walls feel like they're closing in. Chapter 10, The Lessons I Lived. If I've learned anything, it's that success doesn't come in a straight line, and it limps, it bleeds, it doubts itself, it gets fired, it cries behind the wheel, it gets passed over, it keeps showing up anyway. I've been the guy with nothing in the fridge. I've been the guy in a boardroom pretending he knew what he was doing. I've led when I didn't have a clue. I've failed when everything was on the line, and I've learned from the bruises. I learned that people don't follow perfection. They follow authenticity. Leadership isn't about being the smartest. It's about being accountable. Soft skills aren't extra. They're essential. Empathy outperforms arrogance. Listening gets you farther than lecturing. Real growth comes from pressure. Comfort zones don't build legacies. Hardship refines you if you let it. And no matter how many titles you earn, if you don't know who you are, none of them matter. Here's what I'd tell the guy who used to sleep on that rain-soaked mattress. You're not broken. You're becoming. Keep showing up. Keep building. Keep telling the truth. That's what makes a man worth following, not what he's built, but what he's survived and the courage it took to keep standing when no one was watching. Chapter 11, The Partners. No one builds anything worthwhile alone. If you're lucky, you meet someone you can go to war with. For me, that's Scott. We met at Color Star Growers. He worked under me, but I knew from day one, this guy had it. Not just smarts, heart. People trusted him. He stayed calm when I spun out. He was the one I'd call if everything went to hell. Years later, when I was launching Riderflex, I needed a partner. I took Scott to Buffalo Wild Wings, our unofficial war room. I pitched him like my life depended on it. You handle people. I'll handle systems. Let's build this. He laughed. Steve, there are already a million recruiting firms. I kept going. He started part-time, then life blindsided him. He'd lost his job, 4 kids, no backup plan, panic etched on his face. We met again. He cried. I don't know if I can do this, he said. I told him, you're not doing it alone. He went all in. Then Robo-Reliance, then Cura Home. Every pitch, setback, and firestorm, we lived it together. He's not just my business partner. He's the one man outside my family I trust with everything. He doesn't need applause, but he deserves all of it. Behind every founder who looks like a lone wolf, there's someone else, steady, loyal, quiet, holding the damn thing up. Chapter 12, When Rose Left. Johnstown, Colorado, early 2020s. Becoming a grandfather opened a part of me I didn't know was still soft. When Nick moved back to Colorado, married, and had Rose, it felt like everything I had fought for had finally arrived. She called me Papa. She ran barefoot through the yard. She sat on my lap with sticky hands and bedtime stories. We were close, me, Kim, and that girl. It felt complete. A reward for sleepless nights, parenting mistakes, times I stood when I wanted to collapse. Then one day, Nick told us they were moving to Oklahoma. Just like that, gone. When he called, Kim and I were sitting on the couch. He got right to the point. We're moving. My heart sank. Kim's eyes met mine. In that moment, we felt years of effort, sacrifice, and hope slipping away. I told Nick plainly, this is probably a mistake. I wasn't trying to control him or be mean. I was a dad who had seen storms and could smell another brewing. I knew about issues in his marriage. I knew if they moved and things fell apart, his wife might stay in Oklahoma and Rose might end up out of reach. I saw that future and tried to warn him. After he hung up, Kim and I just stared at each other. Then the dam broke. We cried the hardest we have ever cried together. We held each other in our arms and wept like kids. Our sobs shook the walls. For a long time, we couldn't speak. It wasn't just sadness, it was heartbreak. It was the weight of realizing that no matter how much you pour into your children, you can't shield them from every storm. It was the pain of knowing our weekends with Rose, our daily visits, our future memories would be fewer and farther between. We felt abandoned and powerless. We didn't talk deeply to Nick for a long time after that. Surface stuff maybe, but the closeness, the calls and connection, gone. Underneath it all, I felt betrayed, not by the move, but by the fact that I saw the wreckage coming and he ignored the warning. As a father, one of the hardest things is watching your child run toward a cliff you've already fallen off. It took years and a lot of heartache, but I learned something. My job isn't to control my kids. It's to love them, even when they don't take my advice, even when they mess up, even when they walk away. I used to get furious when they didn't listen, used to take it personally. Now I try to be available. If they call for help, great. If not, I still love them. I've stopped trying to change them. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means trusting them to find their own way. We still see Rose, phone calls, road trips, but it's not the same. We dreamed of having family close, of growing old with grandkids down the street, pancakes on Saturdays, school concerts, shoes by the door. Then they were gone. That's the cost of raising strong kids. They leave, If you do it right, they don't need you forever, but that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Every time I hear her voice say, "I love you, Papa," across the miles, it reminds me why I never quit. Chapter 13, After the Nest is Empty. When Spencer moved out, the silence hit harder than I expected. No more football schedules, no more backpacks on the floor, no more wrestling matches or late-night fries after a tournament. Just a still house and two people trying to remember who they were before kids. I'd spent 20 years identifying as a dad in motion, protector, provider, Uber driver, motivational speaker, disciplinarian. Now I had to figure out who I was without all that. I did what I always do when I don't know what to do. I packed up and drove into the mountains, into the quiet, into open air where the phone doesn't ring and no one needs anything. I camped, I hiked, I lit fires, I cooked under the stars, sometimes alone, sometimes with Kim, who rolled with it. We bought a camper, we bought ATVs, we explored Colorado and Wyoming, back roads, forest roads, deadened dirt paths, us together, untethered. Those became some of the happiest years of our life. We didn't need much, dirt, wind, and each other. But parenting wasn't always warm or simple. Step parenting is hard, especially with teenagers. Nobody talks about it enough. You love these kids with everything, but there's always an edge, a quiet doubt, a fear you'll never be enough. I wasn't patient. I wasn't soft. I wasn't even kind half the time. Felicia and Kyle were Kim's kids from her first marriage. They didn't live with us full time, but when they did, it was complicated. The tension wasn't always spoken, but always there. I resented their leaving their mom to live with their dad. Deep down, I felt like they had broken her heart, and I didn't handle that well. I turned that anger on them, not physically, but emotionally. I was too hard. My thinking was twisted, but real. If you're going to hurt Kim, I'll hurt you back. They'd fight with their dad, come live with us, then leave again. Each time, my bitterness grew. It leaked into how I treated them. I regret not being more patient, compassionate, a better stepfather. What I can say is I always supported them financially. I wanted them to succeed. I'm grateful we've built strong relationships now. We didn't do it perfectly, but we never quit. We never stopped loving them. Kim's love language is quiet noticing followed by quiet action. She never storms a room. She pays attention. If I skip dinner, she reheats a plate an hour later without saying anything. If she hears me mention a book, it shows up on my nightstand. She doesn't say, "I love you," often. She shows it in the details. Chapter 14, Leading Through Losses. Oklahoma, late 1980s to early 1990s. You don't learn leadership in a seminar. You learn it when everything falls apart and no one's coming to save you. Lesson 1. Lead like someone you'd want to follow. At 21, I managed a Love's Convenience store in Walters, Oklahoma. Young, cocky, full of fire, I burned my entire team. They quit. 9 employees dropped uniforms on the counter and walked out. The store was 24 hours a day, no closing, no breaks. I stood at the register in shock. Then I did what I had to do. I ran the store myself for 30 hours straight, no sleep, no help. I rang up customers, restocked shelves, cleaned toilets, and interviewed every warm body that walked through the door. Finally, I found someone competent enough to take the register so I could shower and pass out. That day, I realized leadership isn't about barking orders. It's about not quitting when you're the last one standing. Lesson 2. You can be right and still lose. Later that year, managing another store, I had to fire the police chief's daughter. She was dipping into the till. I warned her twice. The third time, I let her go. An hour later, the chief stormed in yelling, "You can't fire my daughter." I said, "She stole. She's gone." Corporate didn't want the heat. They let me go. I was right, but still lost. I learned that being right isn't always enough. It's not what you do. It's how you do it. Lesson 3. Character beats charm. A few years later, Camelot Music flew me to Utah for a special turnaround project and unspoken audition for district manager. One night, a bunch of us went out for dinner. I was driving a rental car, goofing off. Someone pointed at a trash can. "Bet you won't hit it." I laughed. They pushed. I caved and hit it. Back at the hotel, they all bailed. I stood there alone, staring at the crumpled fender, thinking I'd thrown away my shot. Next morning, I walked into my boss's office and owned it. It was me. I was stupid. "I'll pay for the damage." He nodded. Didn't say much. A week later, I got the promotion. Turns out they weren't watching our store numbers. They were watching our character. Lesson 4, don't clone yourself. When I became a district manager, I came in hot. On my first store visit, I bulldozed the manager with critiques, suggestions, pressure. She quit the next day, called my boss and said I was awful. He called me and said, "What, is that how all your visits will go?" That hit hard. I realized I was trying to turn people into versions of me, but that's not leadership. Leadership is helping people become the best version of themselves, and that starts with shutting up long enough to listen. Chapter 15, The Last to Know. Tulsa, mid-1990s. You already know how I found out Keith wasn't my biological father. You know about the phone call, the stunned silence, and the grief without a name. But here's what lingered. It wasn't that Keith wasn't my real dad. It was that many people already knew, my half-brother, cousins, aunts, uncles, people who shared meals and said they loved me, they all knew. And no one told me. That part haunted me. It wasn't the secret itself, it was the betrayal of silence. It made me question every hug, every "I'm proud of you," every shared memory. For a while, I carried that bitterness like armor. I shut down, built walls, stopped trusting the people I once would have taken a bullet for. And worst of all, I turned that hurt inward. I started to believe maybe I wasn't worth the truth. Maybe I was some kind of mistake. Over time, I learned something. Truth doesn't just break things, it builds them. It forces you to choose who you want to be next. I made a promise. My kids would never wonder, and they'd never have to find out who they were from a stranger or a saliva kit. They'd never be the last to know, because truth, even when painful, is a form of love. And love, at its best, doesn't hide. I was there when Keith passed. Sitting at the edge of his hospital bed, I waited for some last-minute truth or tenderness. None came. He just slipped away. Maybe that was the truest ending he could offer, a man of few words taking the last ones with him. I've carried that vow into my own home. My kids have never been the last to know. When Kim and I struggled, when jobs fell apart, when money dried up, we sat them down and told them the truth. They deserve that. I refuse to let silence do to them what it did to me. Chapter 16, We're Never Moving Here. Washington, D.C., early 2010s. We stood on a rooftop in D.C., surrounded by millionaires. It was the 4th of July. The Capitol dome glowed in the background. Wine flowed. Everyone was dressed sharp, shaking hands, laughing with polished confidence. I had a solid executive job with healthy back and X-chair. They'd been pushing us to relocate from Colorado to D.C. It looked like we belonged. I was clean-shaven, suited up, drink in hand. Kim had her heels on, her hair done, looking stunning. We mingled with the power crowd, overlooking the city from a row house rooftop, fireworks exploding across the sky. Kim leaned over and said, quiet, calm, matter of fact, "You know, we're never moving here, right?" I looked at her. She wasn't joking or angry. She was certain. And I knew she was right. We didn't belong to that world. We could swim in it, but we weren't from it. Kim was a small-town Texas girl. I was an Oklahoma kid who grew up with dirt roads and duct tape. We didn't want status. We wanted substance. We didn't want to climb. We wanted to stay grounded. That night reminded me who we were. We could blend in, but our roots ran deep in different soil. We stayed in Colorado, near the mountains, the sky, and peace. Well, I never regretted that. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say, no thanks, even when the world is offering you a rooftop view. What people don't know is that for 3 years before that rooftop party, I was flying back and forth from Colorado to Washington every single week. I would leave on Monday, live in a hotel, work 12-hour days, and fly home on Friday. I would collapse into bed, kiss Kim, mow the lawn, pay bills, and then do it again. Kim held down the house alone. She fixed toilets, paid bills, raised teenagers, and kept our marriage intact while I chased a paycheck across the country. Those 3 years stretched us thin. We promised each other we would never let any job put that kind of distance between us again. Chapter 17, When Coaching Became Calling. ReaderFlex started as a recruiting firm. Somewhere along the way, it became something else. It started with one guy, laid off 3 times in 2 years, smart, skilled, but broken. He reached out, said he didn't know where to start, said he was done. We reworked his resume, practiced interview questions, helped him find his voice again. He got the offer. He called me in tears. You gave me hope. That moment shifted something. I realized I wasn't running a business. I was rebuilding belief. I started offering coaching, resume reviews, interview prep, career strategy. One by one, people started coming back to life. Single moms, mid-career executives, veterans, college graduates, people who were stuck. They'd sit across from me, Zoom call or phone, tired and out of gas. I'd tell them, you're not done. You're in a hard chapter. I knew that chapter. I had lived it. Mattress on the floor, trailer house, no job, no plan. When I coached, it wasn't theory. It was scars. It was real. People don't need lectures. They need someone to say, I've been there. Let's get through this together. That's what RiderFlex became, a bridge from who you were to who you're becoming. Chapter 18, 3 Startups and a Prayer. Johnstown, Colorado, 2013 to 2025. Starting one company is crazy. Starting 3, that's either grit or insanity. After RiderFlex gained traction, I started seeing holes in the market, gaps that no one else was filling. I jumped again. Kura Home Services was born out of simplicity. Homeowners didn't need flash. They needed reliability, clean ducts, routine maintenance, trustworthy techs, people who would show up. We built that. Then came the future. Robo-Reliance was born with one question. What happens when all these robots break? The world was charging into automation. AI in warehouses, smart vacuums, delivery bots, humanoids that could fetch your groceries. But no one was asking, who fixes them at 2 a.m. when they glitch? We stepped in, created support infrastructure, field techs, AI diagnostics, emergency repair services, a human backbone for a robotic world, no big funding rounds, no unicorn dreams, execution, and stress. What people don't tell you is that startup life can consume you. No sleep, no margins, no safety net. Every decision feels like it could sink you. Every dollar feels like your last. Every hire feels like a marriage. People see the growth, the branding, the momentum. They don't see the founder sitting in the dark at 2 a.m. wondering how to make payroll. I've been that guy. I've been the guy who couldn't sleep because 15 families were depending on me to make the right decision. I've been the guy who drank too much, worked too long, said too much. Running a company will teach you more about yourself than any book. It strips you. It tests your marriage, your health, and your mind. I wouldn't trade it. It gave me freedom. It gave me impact. It gave me purpose. But here's a truth most won't say. Startup life isn't for everyone. It's brutal. It's personal. It's lonely. And it's the most honest work I've ever done. By the time our ventures were humming, my body was screaming. I didn't collapse in a hospital, but I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up with a tightness in my chest I couldn't ignore. I brushed it off, drove to meetings anyway. Panic attacks hit in parking lots. I'd sit in my car, heart racing, mind spinning, unable to breathe. Doctors prescribed medication to calm me down. I struggled to accept it because I wanted to be tougher, but I wasn't. I was human. Anxiety and sleepless nights dogged me until I learned to set boundaries. I started turning off my phone after dinner, taking weekends off, trusting my team, letting things breathe. It didn't make the stress vanish, but it kept me from breaking. It saved my marriage. It saved me. Chapter 19, Forks in the Road. Life is made up of left turns and right turns. You don't always know which ones matter when you take them. Sometimes you look back and realize one tiny decision changed everything. The night that could have ended it all. We were driving back late one night, me and a girl I was seeing before I met Kim. I wasn't plastered, but I had been drinking. Enough to know I had no business behind the wheel. The car was quiet. Dashboard lights glowed dull green. My fingers tapped the steering wheel, trying to stay steady. Then it happened. Red and blue lights lit up the rearview mirror, flashing, pulsing like a siren inside my chest. My stomach dropped. I eased the car to the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires. My heart slammed. I killed the engine. The world slowed down. "Evening," the officer said flatly. "You been drinking tonight, sir?" I nodded, swallowed hard. "Yes, sir, a couple." "Step out of the vehicle." The door creaked as I opened it. My legs felt stiff, like I was stepping into a courtroom instead of a highway ditch. The gravel shifted under my boots. "Walk the line, heel to toe. Don't lift your arms." I tried. The balance was shaky, not from booze, from fear. My chest was tight, my palms slick. The world narrowed down to the beam of his flashlight and the edge of my future. He asked more questions. "Touch your nose. Count backward. Say the alphabet without singing." He was quiet for a moment after that, looking at me like he already knew what this could cost me. I broke the silence. "Officer, this is a company vehicle. If you take me in tonight, I lose my job. I lose everything. Please let her drive me home." He raised an eyebrow. "She been drinking too?" "Yes, but not like me." He exhaled. "Get her out of the car." She stepped out, nerves radiating. "Ma'am, have you had anything to drink tonight?" She lied. "No, sir." He tested her. She passed barely. There was a long silence, the kind where a man decides whether to ruin your life or let you walk away with it. Finally, he said, "Drive him home. Don't stop. Don't screw this up." We climbed back into the car. As we did, a second set of headlights appeared. Another patrol cruiser pulled in behind us. A supervisor. They were talking, pointing, looking at our license plate. I started the engine with shaking hands and eased forward. We didn't speak for a mile, didn't breathe until we were back on the highway. One more drink, one more wobble, one more second of hesitation, and I might have ended up in a jail cell. Or unemployed. Or worse. I've never forgotten how thin that line was. The follow-up lesson. Years later, as a district manager in retail, I learned another lesson the hard way. I had 15 store managers. We were always ranking them, talking about who might be ready to move up. I had a guy I touted as the best in the region. At a regional meeting, 7 district managers debated and lobbied. We ranked store managers on a big board. After hours of back and forth, my guy landed at number 1. We agreed that if another district manager spot opened, he would get it. It was a feather in my cap. I drove home feeling proud. 2 months later, on a Saturday morning, I opened my email. There was a letter to my boss from that store manager, the guy I had talked up for months. It was an apology letter and a resignation letter rolled into one. He admitted he had been stealing cash deposits from the company for 6 months. At that time, stores still took a lot of cash. Managers made daily deposits. Part of my job was to check deposit slips when I visited stores. I stopped doing that for him. After all, he was my number 1 guy, right? The best in the region. I didn't need to verify his deposits, so I got lazy. I stopped following up. He started rolling deposits. For a while, he could cover his tracks by adding extra cash from the next day's sales. It caught up to him when he couldn't deposit enough cash back before someone at corporate noticed. They called him out. He stole a lot of money. The worst part? It was clear I hadn't been following up like I should. If I had, I would have caught it months earlier. That email hurt my credibility with my supervisor. It took a long time to restore trust. It made me less quick to sign off on someone. It taught me a painful truth. No matter how comfortable you get with somebody, no matter how good you think they are, you still need to follow up. Trust but verify. Because access to cash can do bad things to good people. Whether it's someone in accounting or anyone with access to financials, checks and balances matter. If you skip them, it will come back to hurt you. A blow that almost broke me. One of the stranger forks in my life had nothing to do with business strategy or money. It was about ego and alcohol. In the mid-90s, I was a district manager for Camelot Music in Austin. Adam was one of my best store managers and reported to me. We were both young, competitive, and prone to thinking we were bulletproof. One night, a group of us went out for drinks after work. The mood was light until the beers took over and the trash talk started. What began as teasing turned sharp. We started mouthing off to each other, each of us trying to prove we were tougher. Before I knew it, we were in the parking lot face to face. Words turned into shoving. Then we were swinging. Two grown men who were supposed to know better brawling in a dark lot over nothing but pride. It could have ended my career right there. Adam could have called HR the next morning and I would have been out. Instead, we both showed up at work, bruised and hungover, and acted like nothing had happened. He didn't report me. He protected me. I thanked him, but I never forgot what I owed him. A few years later, I got promoted and he took over my old district manager role. Loyalty is a rare thing in business. That night in the parking lot taught me how fragile your future can be and how the way you handle a bad moment can define a relationship for years. It also reminded me that people will remember how you treat them when no one is watching, and sometimes your worst nights show you who you can trust. The weed run. At 18, working at a corner store in Oklahoma, my manager was selling weed on the side. One day he said, "I need to move 20 pounds to Arkansas. You want to make $500? I said yes without thinking. We loaded the weed into a 79 Ford Torino and hit the highway. We got pulled over outside Little Rock. The cop gave us a speeding ticket, never opened the trunk. We drove away like we'd dodged a missile. A curious cop, and my whole story could have been a prison sentence, a record, a different destiny. There are guys sitting in jail right now who were like me, regular kids who took a dumb turn and got caught. There's not a day that goes by where I don't thank God for mercy in those moments. I didn't earn it. I got lucky. Chapter 20. No full brothers, no roadmap. Kim and I didn't come from stability. We both came from fragmentation. She had 3 sisters, each with a different dad. I had 2 half-brothers, a half-sister, and a stepsister. Not one full sibling between us. We weren't born into legacies. We were born into disorder, patchwork families, stepdads, remarriages, different last names at the same dinner table. We weren't handed a blueprint. We built our own. When we came together, we didn't know what we were doing. We knew what we didn't want to repeat. We raised our blended family with structure, love, hard rules, and harder-earned affection. I was affectionate with the kids because I never got that from my dad. But I was also hard, demanding, tough. Kim was a receiver, not a giver. She didn't initiate hugs or say, "I love you" often, but she noticed things. When you skipped dinner or mentioned being tired of takeout, a warm meal would appear later. Her love was action. Mine was presence. Together we figured it out. Not perfectly, but fiercely. Epilogue: 0 to something. This isn't a book about business. It's a book about becoming, about being a broke kid in a trailer who dared to dream. It's about facing loss, betrayal, and fear and moving anyway. It's about building not just companies, but a life rooted in love, work, and purpose. I've been the guy with garnished wages, the dad who couldn't afford Christmas, the executive with no clue. I've also been the founder, the mentor, the man people call when they need hope. If my story proves anything, it's that you don't need a head start. You don't need a trust fund. You don't need permission. You need one good reason not to quit. Because no matter where you begin, on a couch, in a trailer, in a parking lot, you can build something. You can become something. You can leave a mark that matters. That's why I started a podcast and wrote my books, not to impress anyone, but to reach the people I'll never meet, to leave behind something useful and true. If you're holding this book and wondering whether you're too far behind, you're not. You're in the chapter that makes the rest of it worth reading. Someday, when the dust settles and the fire fades, you'll look around and realize you're not at zero anymore. You're something. And that's more than enough. I'm still standing, still showing up, still learning, still fighting, because I went from zero to something. If you're in the middle of your own mess, remember this: you're not lost. You're on page 38 of your own story. Keep going. Timeline map. 1970s to 1980s. Born and raised in Oklahoma. Tough early years, worked odd jobs at Love's. First leadership lessons learned through failure. Early to mid-1990s, married to my first wife, had Nick and Spencer, promoted in retail management as a district manager, divorce, lost the boys. Late 1990s, lived in a trailer, met Kim, moved to Connecticut for a promotion. Kim lost custody of her kids. We both felt the sting of broken families. Early 2000s, reclaimed the boys, moved to Oklahoma, built a new life with Kim, financial struggles, deep love. 2005, terminated from Bath & Body Works as a district manager for a policy violation, took a job at Color Star Growers, moved to Colorado for a fresh start, new house, new hope, started climbing back. 2007 to 2008, clawed back into leadership during tough times, promoted to chief operating officer at Fresh Produce during the recession, laid off people to save the company, carried the emotional weight. 2008 to 2013, continued leading under pressure, developed a heart for people, started dreaming of building something of my own. 2013 to present, started Riderflex, then Cura Home Services, then Robo Reliance, built everything from scratch with Scott and Kim, no investors, no handouts, became a podcast host and author, present, grandfather, camper, husband, mentor, founder, still standing, still showing up, still learning, still fighting, because I went from zero to something. About the author, Steve Urban didn't grow up with a silver spoon. He grew up with grit. Raised in Oklahoma by a hardworking single mom, Steve's early life was shaped by struggle, blue-collar values, and an unshakable belief that resilience beats pedigree. That same grit carried him through corporate boardrooms, trailer parks, near-empty bank accounts, and eventually reinvention. Today, Steve is the founder and CEO of Riderflex, a recruiting and consulting firm built from scratch, no funding, no fluff, just hustle. He's also the host of the Riderflex podcast, where he interviews leaders from all walks of life, and the author of 2 Riderflex guidebooks on leadership, hiring, and interviewing. His latest venture, Robo Reliance, is about solving the human problems behind robotic futures. But this memoir, it's not about titles or business wins. It's about surviving when life guts you. It's about being the parent who stays when the other walks out. It's about dragging an old mattress out of the mud and sleeping on it because it's all you've got left. Steve writes like he talks. Straight up, no sugarcoating, all heart. With honesty, humor, and a fair amount of scar tissue, he pulls back the curtain on what it really means to rebuild your life and to do it with your kids watching. He's a man who's failed hard, loved deeply, and kept showing up anyway. He now splits his time between business ventures, mentoring job seekers, and serving the public as a regional representative for the New Mexico Economic Development Department. But the legacy he's proudest of? His kids. They know the truth. They've seen the scars, and they've always known where they came from. Because Steve never pretended to be perfect. He just refused to quit.